Animations are comprised of little teeny animations that make up a larger story. There needs to be consistency between all these little animations, and one way we do that is to go ahead and validate the scene project settings every time we set up an element. Then we'll also take a look at a very top level type of storyboard specific for this scene only, not the entire animation. I've just created a new file. One of the most important things you can do is make sure that you go to the project settings before you begin and verify that the dimensions of the file are exactly what you want. If we were going to go ahead and work in HD or any item like this, I would want to change it at this point in time. NTSC standards are for US television. The PAL standards are for European television. I'll leave the default right here just so we're always working with that. Frame rate 24. If you're unfamiliar with how things get produced into the television world, 24 frames per second is the standard for digital video. And that's great pushing it out to YouTube or anything like that if you would ever want to show that. You can get away with it on a television, but NTSC standards, if we were to switch this real quick, you'll see that sometimes it jumps up to 29.297. If I click this, it's going to leave it at 24 since we're doing digital output, but the maximum frame rate that works for US television is almost 30 frames a second. I'll come back to our widescreen default right here. Also, at this point in time, we're going to leave the setting for start frame at 1, end frame at 240. Now, we'll probably be changing this because the scene we're creating may be a little bit longer than 10 seconds. At a frame rate of 24 frames a second, this equals 10 seconds worth of animation, so you can do a little bit of math on that. The background color is going to be left as white. There would be times if you wanted a solid color or you were working with someplace in integration with a video software where you might want to actually have a different color back there like a green or blue, as well as something that may just work for your scene. We won't do that, so we can control it very specifically with layer settings inside the project. Depth of field is something we're going to use, but I'm not going to turn this on until we get ready to engage it. You can kind of slow down the process a little bit, and it adds another little feature to work with when you're working in 3D view, which we will be. Render styles I will leave as normal for everything, so we can control specifically how it will look. We will be wanting to sort layers by depth and by true distance, like we've learned in another movie, but again, I won't be engaging that until we do depth of field. We can control this specifically at render time by a layer per layer or group by group setting inside the document. When it comes to depth of field, it will be important to have this turned on. So all this to say, I'm going to accept the default settings. This was why. The next thing that's really important is to take a look at just how you will approach the scene. So I put together just a quick storyboard so we can get an idea of how we want to design the scene out. So I'm going to create a new layer, an image layer, and just bring in the storyboard that I have put together for us to take a look at real quickly. Let me back out with my mouse just a little bit. Really basic stuff going on right here. In scene 1, we're going to have a bank robber sitting next to a table, and we can see maybe I should shrink this up a little bit so it all fits into our window and we can zoom in a little closer without that purple square going on. We've got our bank robber who's going to be in kind of a disheveled hotel room. We are going to have a cat in the scene, I haven't decided where, and he's going to be kind of playing with money that he's got in the scene. It'll be one of these really cheap divey places that has like a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Important to the scene for the rest of the story is the time that things are taking place. So there's a clock on the wall, and there'll be a window to see outside. From this window, as we go into the scene, the camera moves into the scene, moves over to the cat. We're going to look at some animated actions for the cat, look at some animated actions specifically for the bank robber himself. The camera will go ahead and pan back a little bit, capture the time, and then move backwards, but start to focus a little bit on the window where we're going to have the government man or the law enforcement officers out there that we see them moving, which is a setup for the exact next scene that takes place. So it's important, even if you don't know how to draw really well, just to get some basic ideas down, because man, it is so much faster to do this with a pencil or like in Photoshop sketching, which is how I did this, to go ahead and kind of get your mind thinking about how you want to approach this, because it will affect how you start building things like the background, which we'll handle in our next movie.